When most of us think of Mardi Gras, we instantly picture the giant floats, the massive crowds on Bourbon Street, and just the sheer tourist spectacle of it all, right? But welcome to this explainer, where we're going to bypass all that surface level stuff. We are diving into New Orleans' most guarded, deeply profound tradition, the black masking Indians. We're going to explore how things like glass beads, ostrich feathers, and raw street beads are literally protecting a living, breathing cultural heritage.
Because let's be honest, there are kind of two completely different versions of Mardi Gras happening at the exact same time. You've got the Main Street version with the mythological floats and the big crews, but then you have this incredibly secretive, hidden world. The Mardi Gras Indian tribes don't publish their parade routes, they don't have factory-made floats. Instead, they navigate these secret back neighborhood routes wearing intricate hand-sewn feather and bead suits. It's a street-level tradition that has absolutely nothing to do with entertaining tourists and literally everything to do with community, history, and spiritual connection.
To really understand where this comes from, we actually have to look way back, outside the city, into the swamps with the Maroons. Back during the era of slavery, African Americans who managed to escape bondage would flee into the surrounding wilderness. And out there, they found refuge with local Native American tribes, like the Huma and the Chitimacha. These groups shared their cultures, they intermarried, and they built this incredibly strong bond of solidarity in the face of shared oppression. So this tradition of masking as Indians, it sprang directly from that early vital connection. It was, and still is, a symbol of profound respect for the Native Americans who offered them asylum. Okay, so how did that early solidarity eventually move from the swamps into the city streets? Well, by the 1700s and 1800s, enslaved and free people of color started gathering on Sunday afternoons in Congo Square. They'd share drum rhythms from their homelands, communicating through music and dance. And then there was this fascinating spark. In the winter of 1884, Buffalo Bill's Wild West show actually wintered in New Orleans. They had this multicultural cast. It included Plains Indians, and it just galvanized the local black audiences. Literally the very next year, in 1885, a man named Chief Bicabite Batiste, who was of mixed African and American Indian descent, founded the Creole Wild West. That right there is the very first formally recorded Mardi Gras Indian tribe. Now look at the sheer, unbelievable detail of this beadwork. I mean, this isn't just some weekend hobby. It's a driving force of living heritage. So much so that it's an expression of UNESCO-recognized intangible culture. Creating just one of these suits takes an entire year. You have working-class men, mechanics, dishwashers, postal workers, sitting around creating what is basically museum-quality art. Every single bead is placed with a purpose. It's like they're painting with beads to tell a story of resistance. The craftsmanship is so deeply rooted in the community that you don't just put on a costume. As they say in New Orleans, being a Mardi Gras Indian is a way of life. And you really can't talk about this pursuit of beauty without talking about the revered Chief of Chiefs, Big Chief Allison Tootie Montana. See, for a long time, the public face of the Mardi Gras Indians was actually pretty violent. Rival gangs would literally fight and shed blood in the streets to settle scores. But Tootie Montana made it his absolute life's mission to change that. He shifted the tribes away from violence and toward this fierce, breathtaking aesthetic competition. Under his leadership, the rule became, we're going to outdress each other, not fight each other. The whole goal became to be the prettiest. He masked for almost 50 continuous years, totally transforming the visibility and respectability of the culture. But here's the crazy thing. Being the prettiest requires just an insane amount of physical endurance. These hand-sewn suits aren't just stunning to look at. They can weigh up to 150 pounds. To put that in perspective, that is like strapping a full-grown adult to your shoulders and then not just standing there, but dancing, chanting, and marching through the sweltering streets of New Orleans for hours on end. It is a grueling, magnificent display of dedication. And honestly, the financial commitment is just as staggering. A working-class tribe member might drop up to $10,000 on glass beads, ostrich feathers, sequins, and velvet for just one single suit. And remember, they are often creating a brand new suit every single year. They prioritize this ancestral craft above pretty much everything else. Kids grow up knowing that bead and feather supplies are a household priority. There are even these legendary stories in the neighborhoods about the local power company looking the other way right before Carnival, because, well, everybody knows the electric bill comes second to finishing the suit. So what happens when they finally take to their secret routes on Mardi Gras Day or St. Joseph's Day? Well, they don't just wander around in a random crowd. They move like a highly organized tactical unit across the city blocks. Way up ahead, you've got plainclothed informants blending into the crowd. Then comes the tip of the spear, the spy boy.
Blocks behind him is the first flag, or flag boy. Holding the perimeter and forcefully keeping the crowds back is the wild man. And finally, bringing up the rear in all his glory is the big chief. I love this quote because Larry Bannock really hits the nail on the head here. He says the spy boy is the baddest of all the Indians. This guy is the fearless scout navigating the absolute front of the procession. He usually dresses in a lighter, much more mobile running suit. And since these routes are completely secret, nobody actually knows where the other tribes are. So it is the spy boy's literal job to scour the streets looking for rival tribes, acting as that very first line of defense and communication. Okay, so let's say two tribes do inevitably cross paths. That's when the street hierarchy snaps into action. It becomes this elaborate block-long chain of visual communication. The spy boy spots the rival tribe, but he doesn't have a walkie-talkie. Instead, he signals back using specific dances, whoops, and hand language. The flag boy, who is a block or two back, sees this, raises his massive feathered flag high in the air, and relays the message down the line. Ultimately, the big chief gets the signal. He halts the entire procession, adjusts his headdress, and prepares his song. It turns into this highly orchestrated street theater where two master artists finally meet face to face to appraise a whole year's worth of each other's work. Because the big chief, he's so much more than just a parade leader. He is the spiritual anchor of the entire community. If you've ever seen the HBO series Treme, the character Big Chief Albert demonstrates this so powerfully. He refers to himself as the guardian of the flame, out there chanting to wake up the dead. It's this fantastic reminder that the tradition is deeply, deeply spiritual. It's about honoring ancestors and demanding respect for a culture that has historically been marginalized. When they chant in the streets, their defining mantra is, "We won't bow down." It is just an absolute, unyielding assertion of dignity. And you know that defiant energy? It didn't just stay boxed into the neighborhoods. It actually laid the auditory groundwork for so much of American music. What started as secretive drum circles in Congo Square to communicate on the streets eventually became the foundational rhythms for jazz, and later on, for New Orleans funk. The music isn't just a byproduct. It is an undeniable, integral part of both their resistance and their celebration. It is genuinely amazing to track how this raw, tambourine-driven street music evolved into absolute commercial gold. For decades, it was strictly a street phenomenon. Guys just beating on bottles and tambourines through the back alleys. But then in 1970, groups like the Wild Magnolias, led by their chief Bo Dallas, took those traditional chants and backed them with a full band of New Orleans funk musicians. They electrified the traditional sound, they turned it into a massive dance anthem, paving the way for these legendary 1970s funk recordings that brought the spirit of the Mardi Gras Indians to the entire world. In fact, this blending is so deeply embedded in our culture that I guarantee you've heard it without even realizing it. Take the famous Mardi Gras anthem, Eco Eco. That song is a direct, living artifact of this shared resistance. When you actually break down the anatomy of the song, it's wild. You hear Native American Choctaw and Chickasaw vocabulary, Louisiana Creole dialect, French influences, all layered over West African call-and-response song structures and polyrhythms. It's literally the history of New Orleans' marginalized communities, all woven together into one unbreakable beat. So that brings us to a really fascinating question to wrap up this explainer. We started by looking at the incredible physical artifacts of this tradition, right? The feathers, the rhinestones, those massive 150-pound suits. But think about how these intricate, tangible creations serve as so much more than just festival wear. They are the ultimate armor. Through needle and thread, rhythm and chant, the Mardi Gras Indians have built this undeniable fortress around their identity. How does sewing beads in a tiny room preserve a centuries-old spirit of resistance? It does it by ensuring that every single year, against all odds, the descendants of Maroons and Native Americans step out onto those streets in unimaginable beauty, look the world right in the eye, and absolutely refuse to bow down. Thanks so much for joining me today, and keep exploring the history that's hidden right in plain sight.